Welcome to Light Technology and a further development of an explanation of exactly what we've been up to. We have gone through some various processes during the development of the crystal technology computing, and we've brought about some new changes, really, I think, when it comes to the possibility of future future strengths when it comes to the new science relating to light itself. What we've managed to do is find out exactly what happens when it comes to certain parts of creation. There are the light wave band, which we know of, which is the light wave band itself, and it goes from AM/FM and then into ultraviolet as well here. But of course, you've got the middle part, which is the visibility side of the light wave itself. Now, what happens during the process of acceptance when it comes to the bioelectric, which is part and parcel of your physical body, right? So our cells are bio, and they have electrical system in, and your brain is a bioelectrical, a bioelectrical system. And basically, what happens is that the interaction between electricity and all of your cells and the communication that goes from electricity and saturates into the cellular structures. We're finding that the actual waveband itself is incorporated into and used by creational nature when it comes to cellular structures. Now, I'm talking about things like plant life, and also talking about certain plants that grow in certain environmental lights. So there are certain frequencies that are accepted by various different plants and various different other forms of life, like trees and flowers that are colourful. And not only are they accepted in saturation, but it's also part and parcel of the overall communications that the visible waveband actually comes into contact with. So we've got the visible waveband, which basically shows and reflects the actual imagery of all things ever since light came into existence, and because it's something which travels and actually saturates and also reflects off objects under acceptance of which frequencies are going to be rejected, in the sense of what's going to be seen or over the collection of the whole of the light wave band itself. And we've also been looking into electromagnetic spectrum. So the spectrum of electromagnetics, when it comes to its colourful waveband, in comparison or in relationship to the physical light wave as well. So we've got the light wave structure and its rainbow colours, and we've got the electric magnetic field and its band and colours. And obviously all of its sets and frequencies are all set up and separated in the structure of its own wave structure. And what we're finding is that the things like when birds fly and they grow and they can navigate under instinct. Now, obviously, the wave band itself of light has all these particular attributes actually already in it. So for birds that use their, let's say, their natural instinct and their bioelectrical systems and uh, their bioelectrical brains, right? What happens is that um, their instincts, which are connected to the light wave band itself, which offers them all of the capabilities of navigation, offers them all of the capabilities of um, magnetic detection, and offers them all of the capabilities of being able to use all of the natural nature's environment for them to be able to navigate if they were flying any great distance from one country to another country. So, because they use all of these attributes that you find in light, and of course, physical visibility, like I said before, plays a big part of gathering this information in. So, our eyes, accept all the light that is shining into them, and gives us all of the reflections of all the colours and all of the surroundings, and also gives us that three-dimensional depth of vision, so we can understand that we are inside a a three-dimensional environment. Now, because of all of the work that we're doing with light technology, and also with the spacecraft and the spaceship, and all of its shielding technology, and playing around with resonance and light wave band frequencies, and also playing around with the strengths of these frequencies for shielding capabilities actually on the craft itself. All the hard work and all the research that we've done, and all the science knowledge of gathering on how crystals form and how crystals perform, and how all of the multiple diverse structures of many crystals together in a plate, which are designed specifically for certain tasks. It means that when electrical current flows over it, or flows through it, or when a light source is basically shone upon it and saturated in its radiation, there's a whole load of information that is basically taken from the light wave band information itself. So we've got, like I said, all the colours that we need, from ultraviolet all the way through to infrared and AM, FM, and various other frequencies. So really, what we're finding out, even in the area of the research when it comes to the hydroponic bay, to be able to build the necessary relevant environment for the plant life to grow. Now, of course, we're also dealing with things like gravitational fields. Now, I know it sounds a bit odd, and I know it sounds a bit remarkable, and I know that most people will probably say, well, my old lecturer at college, was adamant about the gravitational fields. You're not going to be able to get anything out of that, right? But basically, what we've done is that the research into gravity has produced some very good results. So we are now testing and getting into the idea of high-speed particle transport. And really what happens with these is that you have a tube, which is a speeded highway tube, which is to accelerate the particles through this particular tube. And then there is a coil that goes around this central tube, but it matches the natural mathematical coil that you would expect certain particles to follow, right? So when these speeding particles are accelerated through the center of the tube, and they hit the magnetic field of direction, which basically wants these particles to spin in its natural spiral pattern, then they are guided to spin in these natural spiral patterns to be able to finish its course and re-enter the actual central tube, which is its uh, speeded highway tube. So these things will basically speed it at great speed to the end of the actual tube, and then they'll be magnetically spun off into this natural coiled spiral and back into the highway tube. And it's a constant spinning and spinning and spinning and in a constant all the time. And it's goes and it's what happens regarding that one though is it generates enough force, because we are dealing with equal and opposite forces. It generates enough force which enables something to levitate under its force of action. Now, with this being connected to the ship, right, it basically lightens the weight of the ship. So the ship becomes mildly lighter, but it still holds to its mass and its gravity effects in space. So all of that still holds the same natural value. But because it lightens the thing up, and there's like, I mean, I envisioned more than one of these in a spacecraft, and they will be positioned strategically in various different places. And the whole structure will lighten up in the sense of, and be able to travel through space at a lighter volume mass. Now, because it builds a light area to the volume of the mass, it also increases the gravity. It increases the gravity because we have a volume mass of a ship of a volume mass, and then we have various different extra volume masses, which are components and various other things which are in the ship. And then we have a continuation of continuous growth in the ship that builds weight. So we've got exhaust materials that are coming out of certain bits of new technology. We have various collectors of vacuum tubes which basically store these exhausts, and they all build up over time. So even in the hydroponic area, it produces more and more and more the more you grow, and produces more and more. So basically what happens is that the idea is that by making the ship lighter and easier to travel through space under its own velocity, it also increases the volume of the gravity, which is also in the ship itself. So anything that has a small portion of gravity volume, including the human body, will get to experience a little bit of extra gravity actually within the ship, because of these I mean, I'm calling them gravity coils, but I mean they could very easily turn out to be what's the word, anti-gravity for the overall mass, because it just makes it lighter. But I mean, we all know that a heavy object spinning on a pole that is heavier when it's still and not rotating, you can't lift it. Rotate the heavy object on the stick and you can lift it. So it's like an anti-gravity movement. So it makes it lighter. But it doesn't stop the impact of the overall weight, though. This is the thing. So the weight is still the weight. It's only the rotation that enables you to be able to pick the actual item up. So, but the overall weight remains the same. But it also has a velocity on its rotation, and it's also got an extra added bit, because velocity, even though making the item far more easier to manipulate under gravity, of course, when you're in a zero-G style environment, because you have particles, and they are particles, and because you're streaming these particles under great speed and then guiding them round a coil all the way back to its origin, it's this motion of coiled motion rotation and also the speed of it going through this the center tube, which creates the overall machine, right? And then you have it inside another object of a casing, and then you place that casing inside something else, right? So you've got all these extra bits, all added to the actual overall volume. So the idea is that once we've got this thing tested and we've actually got it up and running, it should create more gravity in the ship by making it lighter, right? Anyway, that's just another form of how various other things like light transport can build a connection to the actual light wave band itself. Of course, we're going to be dealing with electromagnetic fields as well. So, and like I said, that we deal with the electromagnetic spectrum and also the visible light wave band, light wave as well, and all of its spectrum. Now, what happens regarding all of this, though, if you can imagine something evolving through time, and if you can imagine cellular structures which are basically evolving in all kinds of different types of liquids. So we're not just talking about liquid waters, we're talking about, we're talking about not just liquid waters, but we're talking about other liquids as well. So there may be gases that have been created into liquids or been, that live a life as a gas, as a liquid. And all these cells that basically evolve through the different time periods of our Earth's atmospheric changes obviously have evolved different connections to different structures of light wave saturation. So light traversing through certain liquids or traversing through certain substances will also change its properties, but when it comes to the saturation of the radiation. So there are some radiation which will be accepted because of the acceptance of whatever type of liquid it is, and others won't be. So it will be slightly rejected other wave band structures. So it also means that the cellular structures that grow and evolve in all of these different types of environments, which is not only just environmental gases, but also environmental gases of liquids, also play a major part in the evolutionary structure of acceptance of many different coloured wave band structures. So, of course, as we know now as scientists, there are certain attributes to the wave band itself. And because there are certain attributes to the wave band, and the evolutionary stages of these wave bands through cellular development and the remembrance of the environments in which they'd actually evolved through each single stage, the cellular structure of cellular life has become extremely diverse in its recognition of what to accept. So when it comes to light acceptance of certain cells, so let's talk about, let's say, trees and leaves, and their capabilities of taking the light from the environment and then turning it into various different products. So we've got sugars and we've got food and saps, and we've got various other vitamins that basically come from just having the leaf just standing out in the light. Now, the bark in the body also will perform a different structure because it's got a different cellular component to it. So it's a different cellular, structure and a different molecular build. So it's more fibrous, and it uses tubes in itself to suck up all the minerals, waters, and liquids that it comes into contact with. But it still is also very similar to the cells of the actual leaf itself, though. And the actual leaf and the cells themselves are all in the area of accepting certain types of certain waveband structures. So even the petals on leaves that show the multiple different colours of multiple different uh, uh, creational acceptance of certain recognition that when it comes to life, that it particularly wants to that it particularly wants to encourage to come and visit the actual plant itself. So there'll be things like wasps and flies and various other creatures, of insects that will be attracted to these particular wave bands. And all of their brains and all of their cellular structures and all of their structural evolution would have followed a certain path all the way through from the beginning, right? To be able to dictate that whatever exists in the structure of life, it will always have an interest to go and have a look at it, right? So it'll be, pollen or nectar or food or, all sorts of things. Sometimes it's just pure interest, you know. Now, because of the acceptance of all these wave structures, and because of all the acceptance of the wave bands themselves, it also means that during the process of evolution and the acceptance of all these different structures, we have certain gifts and certain talents inside our cellular structures, which have been offered and given to us and tailor made because of the saturation of certain acceptances. So there are things like, let's say, radio communications, and there are things like uh, what's the things like medical devices which you can see through and into objects, right? All of this stuff also requires a magnetic field. So say for instance you've got like a magnetic field and you have a life that's inside the magnetic field. Of course, given the right wave structure of waveband frequency, you would be able to see straight through by using the X-ray option that you can find in creation. I mean, the fact that we use it means that it already exists in creation, but not found or even known about, right? So every single thing that we have or use as science exists in creation, but we just haven't found it yet. So because of the see-through capability of X-ray, it also means that light waveband frequencies can also be used by creational nature. So I would say that creational nature has evolved itself to be able to utilize all these gifts. So, to be able to not only just manage and navigate themselves by using their own instincts, but their instincts are definitely hooked up to all of the light band information, because each and every single little bit is a gift which is given to creation for creation to be able to use. But of course, there is a process of being able to have it recognized and for it to be available to you to be able to use it. So, environmental changes would definitely affect the cells and the growth of life to be able to utilize the full capabilities of of all frequencies. Now, because all of this information comes all from waveband frequency and light and audible resonance and saturation into certain things like uh, rock and stone, metals, and all the other things. if you think about really how a neutron star lives its life as an energy star and then dies and produces gold, silver, and platinum, then it means that gold, silver, and platinum as a metal crystal, as part and parcel of some of the first building blocks after the neutron star period of the universe had existed, means that even these metals hold knowledge of information which is old and ancient knowledge. So it would have the knowledge inside it, right, of the full life of its existence. So the fact that we have it on our planet and know where it comes from when it comes to gold, silver, and platinum also means that the capabilities of certain attributes would also be possible. So we're talking about energy really, and we're talking about energy liquids, and we're talking about energy saturation, and we're talking about all sorts of things to do with the birth of the first neutron stars. And obviously gold, silver, and platinum have a part to play in the recognition of how energy liquids and energy structures can be put together because of the knowledge of what the silver, gold, and platinum basically hold within them. So because you have all of that information, you can backtrack and go back into time and find out exactly roughly what the neutron stars were actually made of. So, the fact that they have produced several bits of metal and several bits of certain structures. But of course, silver is it's a good metal, but it's soft, and gold is even softer. And platinum, being platinum, is also another structure which is also pretty malleable in itself. But because of its capabilities of its strength as well, it's probably a very good material to be able to examine. But when you think about things like the old and ancient worlds of alchemy, where people were talking about they're going to produce something from nothing, and that they were going to create something and build the knowledge of gold, silver, and platinum and become rich and wealthy old and ancients. But of course, they never actually managed to reach the level of where they were hoping to get. They probably got as far as being able to plow electrical currents through liquids and then get gold, silver, and platinum to basically fuse itself onto various different things that they could saturate and then call it a miracle, marvelous item. And of course, if they'd have actually understood possibly what the knowledge of the information that they were seeking was for real, then they probably would have found neutron, right? They probably would have found the neutron and the knowledge of neutron and why neutron produces gold, silver, and platinum. So this is how chemistry came about. So chemistry came about because of alchemy. So alchemy, even though fell through the floor and could not survive really in its explanation of what it was doing, chemistry came out of it. So because there was a historical link between these two sciences, one very old and ancient and another one extremely valuable, I got the thinking that there had to be something more involved when it came to the disregard of alchemy. So I put together, with the knowledge that I have gathered by trying to create new technology, I thought the only thing that would match this to be able to get from light into chemistry, right, is that it would have to be light alchemy. So, you know, like alchemy and the explanation of it was born in the belief that there was a connection. So rounding that off and being able to put together a historical uh, milestone of connections between old known knowledge of science, very close but not quite got there, all the way through into chemistry. So I wanted to marry those two together. I wanted to marry the old and ancient alchemy knowledge to chemistry. So we've changed what they did, right, in alchemy, and we've given light alchemy the truthful value to hook up to chemistry. Now, because light is light, and there is and light has created all things, light in its existence of being, right, has created all physical things. It's also created the framework of the existence of the actual uh, of the actual universe itself, right? Now, we won't go into too much detail, but needless to say, light is hooked up to mathematics, and mathematics is hooked up to light, and light and mathematics is hooked up to everything else, like magnetics and all the other things that can be compressed into something of a physical object. So, and don't forget that energy plays a massive part in creation, and energy and the structures of energy and why energy exists and why there are so many different types of energy and so many different types of frequencies and multiple billions of millions of trillions of too many that I can even mention in the diverse connections to the whole of creation. Now, when it comes to finding out relating to people of belief of faith, now, of course, being a Celt as I am, right, and a Celtic druid as I would be, as a Celtic man, I would hold my staff in my hand and I would be a man of a well known, respected Celtic druid. And they held the knowledge of not only the round stones for navigation purposes and for stargazing, they also held the knowledge of wooden penges. And wooden penges were on the Celtic Isles for hundreds of years, and they were known as the land filters and helped clean the country and the ground up. And when the Celtic people built themselves sea penges on either side of each coastline that we have on the island, and hooked it all up to mouth of estuaries, and then placed another penge in each mouth of the estuary. So the great sea penges were out in the deep oceans gathering all the sea life, and the estuary penges were gathering all of the sea life and the river water life. And so they brought the penges in even closer. So they started to build these wooden penges all the way through across the rivers until they met in the center. So the great sea penges were outside in the oceans and gathered all of the ocean bounty. Then that spread out, and they all gathered when they overpropagated with a very good ocean bounty of food, of fish, crabs, crayfish, and shrimp, and all things of goodness. They would all then propagate into the shallower areas, right? They would all learn the knowledge that survival is survival and shallow is probably better. So they would gather around the penges of the great sea penges and live very well. And then they would probably rear their young in the estuary penges. Then they decided to come inland and become freshwater. So we had freshwater shrimp, freshwater crab, freshwater crayfish, freshwater salmon, that's a sea fish, and various other freshwater fish. But because it gathered all of these natural animals together, it meant that the Celts would always have a place to be able to go and eat, right? So fish was on the fish and chips, or the Celtic way of living. Crayfish mainly it was. So anyway, basically, um, with all of this knowledge of filtering the land, now the Druids being the Druids and their staff, and wanting to be able to be respected in their land, of course, they were known as men of light. They were men of light and they believed in the ray of light. Now, I know there's a negativity on a global level when it comes to the ray of light. Now, I'd like to say that the ray of light, right, is to me known as a good light, and it was seen as good, right? So, because the Celts had the knowledge of the ray of light, right, and the Druids, which were the Druids of light, and held the knowledge and the understanding of navigation, land navigation, and filtering and saturation, and knew the knowledge of their country very, very well. Of course, they all became, highly respected in all of their skills of managing the land. Now, because it's the knowledge of the rays of light and also managing natural order of natural life, which is the Druid order, which is to manage the natural order of natural life, they did get to contemplate and meditate on and also consider the stars, the stars. So they would go to their round stones of various different positions and exactly, why they had them positioned in certain places, maybe still a mystery. But the idea is that they were used for navigation and land compasses, but they were also used as a gathering place of a meeting hole. So they could have festivals there and have lots of rituals and various other ways of thinking being brought forward from, say, Europe or various other far-flung lands, where they would come together and there would be a joining of a gathering of the knowledge of what the earth and the globe was up to. Now, because all of this is hooked up to Celtic country of Celts, it's all to do with the understanding of the actual land mass. Now, in the land we have red, green, and blue, right? Now, in our land we have cobalt, iron, and copper, and we are full of cobalt, iron, and copper, red, green, blue. And because of these references of ground references of oxides and various other poisons and various other ground perversions, the Druids brought in the penges and also the crustaceans, and they cleaned and filtered the land. It would clean the water. They would know which to eat and which not to eat. They would know how to concentrate certain types of animals that would live and not die. They would live a very good, healthy life, and they would clean up and saturate in all of these minerals. They would build their casings out of them, and they would build their coloration from them, and they would use every single thing in their environment, and they would live extremely healthily. But to the Celts, it filtered the ground and filtered the land and cleaned up the fresh waters so they could live extremely healthily. But when it came to their round homes of round houses as Celts, they also had a slit window in the back. It also let the light in, and it was their clock. They knew how to tell the time whilst being in their homes. And they could be in their homes all day and they would always know what time of day it was because of this slit on this little window at the back of their home. And you'd always find them positioned and placed in, as you would expect, in certain areas of certain ways. So wherever they positioned their home and their house, they would always put this hole or slit in the relevant place, and it would always, show you the existence of how old the day was. Of course, they had all sorts of other things. They had druid sticks, which they would stick in the ground, and they would watch the shadows. And they would do all sorts of things. They would have various things. They would with the pendiers, they were with sticks in the ground. They could help to position certain things to stars and various other places. So, but of course, it was one of the druids' rituals where they would mark out in the ground various staffs and mark out various star constellations, and it was part of the education of the island. Now, of course, all of this is hooked up to light. It's also hooked up to instinct. If we are living, breathing, bioelectrical light source, then instinct is light. Everything of a value to light is an instinct. And depending on your type of cellular structure would determine which are your gifts within the light band, whether it be electromagnetic, or whether it be physical visible, or whether it be ultraviolet or infrared. You would get to understand who you actually are. Now, when it comes to the research, we have gone into new areas of light waveband recognition when it comes to medical services. Medical services is hooked up to part and parcel of the spacecraft. It's called the medical bay, and it will have a functioning medical system in it. And it's hooked up to the new technology of recognition of light waveband medicines. Now, we're not going to introduce anything fake and false. So we're not going to introduce, everything will be natural, and even the hydroponics and the hydroponic bay will be just as natural. There will be various different colors for plants to accept and improve their cellular structures, improve their growth and their flavor, their taste, their odor, and their aromatic smell. Every single thing that we're doing is to improve the quality of certain life structures. Now, a lot of it can be used on Earth. A lot of it can be hooked up to the new greenhouse style greenhouse effects, where you tailor light in the greenhouse to be able to focus certain qualities and improve plant life. Some plants grow better in different light, and other plants grow faster or slower in other light. Now, we also know that rotation is affected by light. So you could say that the rotation could be seen as a growth of speed, right? Or a reduction in the speed of growth. So we do know that there is a relevant association to rotation, speed, velocity, and also the encouragement of certain areas of life growth in cellular structures. Now, I know that life isn't something which is like a planet affected by light and its rotation, but it is a part of creational nature, and it is and still does use, if it's not the same information, we haven't quite clarified yet whether speed, rotation, and various other effects that light has on physical objects, whether it's the same structure that encourages, not interferes, but encourages the speed of growth, right? So it all depends. Let's say, for instance, that the rotation effect of light also affects physical matter. So let's say we've got a blue light and it will rotate in one direction. You have another light and it will stop its rotation and start rotating in the opposite direction. Depending on how you look at it, if you're in a light where it rotates in one direction, which is clockwise, and then you have a light where it stops its rotation and starts rotating anti-clockwise, then it means it has an effect on physical matter. Now, it's very easy to assume that because of that, there is a physical growth pattern of natural life when it comes to certain saturation of light. Some slow plants down, some speed plants up. So it's still affecting matter. So it all depends on exactly where the research goes when it comes to exactly what is happening when it comes to the new greenhouses or the new hydroponic unit, right? Now, because it has all of these attributes, and because light affects all these things in creation, and has the major part of the majority of building matter, then there are a whole host of things in which you can apply the knowledge of the existence of light to, right? A galactic core of a galactic center is a physical matter of light. And it has a radial diameter of a spread, and it affects the radial depth, and it also has a disk type feel look to it, and it does have a depth and a thickness to it with its central core of heat. And all the matter basically is called into existence and formed and put together because of the central core and the radiation and the heat of it basically having its effect on physical matter. Now, these things have been quite controversial, and they've all been quite but of course, you don't get the future without being able to break the boundaries of what already exists. So we're going to push all of this, because I've had to push as much as I could to get the best out of the development of what we're doing so far anyway. And all I can do is share it with you, share the knowledge for you to be able to test later, right? You'll either believe it, not believe it, controversial or not controversial. Either way, you will be able to test all of it and prove it all for yourselves, right? So, because there is all of this connection, and because the medical side of the medical tubes and the light introduction of various other things, there are things in which you can physically use. So light will repair, we know that much. It will repair, well, it can either do one or two things. It can destroy or repair. And it all depends on what the structure is of its saturated form that it's saturating into, that will determine whether it's a repair or not a repair. But of course, when it comes to the information of the balance of nature, there is lots of things in which you can do which will bring a medical healthcare to the framework of your body. Now, we're saturated in natural light all the time during the daytime, and we're saturated by other light at nighttime, which is reflected light mainly. And because we get the benefit of both reflected light saturation and physical drenching of physical light from our sun in our atmosphere, obviously there are multiple different ways of working. And so to be able to build the structure of safety within the technology and the structure of the medical healthcare in the technology, it builds a good area of using liquids. So if you uh, build a new type of screen with liquids, I mean, we use liquid crystal at the moment, but it's like, but if you build a new type of monitor screen, which basically has a liquid crystal compound and then also has other colourful liquids in it, which also have a benefit to be able to be used in the future, then it means that all of the new energy liquids and all of the other structures that will be included into the new technology of the future will have all of these new attributes because they'll be of a certain color, of a certain type, of a certain waveband, of a certain structure. Then you be able to utilize and use various other things like laser beams and prisms to be able to shine your beam through and to interact with all of these liquids within the actual system. Of course, it's all pretty much pretty much in development. But if you have all of this in mind, healthcare and food source quality and flavors and tastes of good food, natural foods, of pollen and things like plants that produce a lot of pollen, you could have in a new environment where the whole structure is full of plants that produce lots of pollen, and then you could suck all the pollen off, and then you could create a new form of honey. I mean, it would be you could do the same thing that the bees do when they eat it and then excrete it, and basically produce honey from pollen just by purely having these new saturation areas uh, of new greenhouses. So this is where we are, right? When it comes to the creational build of the future. So it's to improve the volume of food, improve the volume of the quality of food, and it'll all be natural, naturally grown in natural in natural fertility, and bathed in all of the relevant light frequencies that enable it to produce a very good quality. And then once you have that, you're able to transform and take that with you into space, right? Now, there is the other side of life is when all of this structure of new growth gets out into natural earth environment instead of a technology greenhouse, we want some of all of this to obviously start to spread out into the natural environment of Earth. Now, Earth's environment will be constantly changing over the billions of years of the life of Earth, and it will naturally have an impact, right? So, personally, I would love to do tests on all sorts of things. When our sun, if our sun expands to a red giant, it will be burning helium and not hydrogen. So I would be bathing plants in helium gas and bathing plants in light sources and all sorts of things, right? As a scientific experiment to find out what's going to happen to our whole Earth, right? When we start being a red rate giant of a sun, basically, beaming down on us. Now, all of this would be valuable to creation because anything out of timestamp that comes to the volume of the knowledge of creation itself would have a value to us, right? But of course, in the universe, it may already exist, right, to creation, and I may be talking out of turn. But to us as scientists, it would be valuable to know exactly what the structures and the possibilities of the cellular evolutionary changes, right? For us to be able to understand what will happen when we get the red giant, and that's if we get the red giant, right? The red giant may not exist. We may burn all of the hydrogen and all of the helium, and it may just turn into a white dwarf, right? If we don't burn all of it, it will be a red giant. If we burn all of it in helium and hydrogen mix, then we'll just get a white dwarf, and that will last for the life of 100 million billion. And if the white dwarf itself, right, appears after the red giant, it would last for 50 million billion. The red giant would last for 100 million billion, and the black dwarf would last for 50 million billion. Now, that's the life of our sun and the knowledge of the life of our sun. But there is the cool down period, which is the black dwarf period, and it will still be radiating heat to the Earth, which means life may continue to go on all the way through the life of the Earth, even all the way through to the black dwarf stage of our sun. Now, because of the size of our sun and the type of sun that it is, that is the structural process of the life that it will go to. So, first 50 million billion, us, right? Second 50 million billion, which is half of the 100 million billion, will be helium burn, or a mix of helium to minimal hydrogen. And then the third 50 million billion will be still helium burn, but will be more in concentration of different gases. And then white dwarf. So these are the stages in which, of course, when you've got your technology and all of your, hopefully, crystal light technology up and running, and all of your blueprinting and your knowledge of light alchemy, the knowledge of light alchemy is extremely important to science, because it holds so many connections to the value of creation. It holds so many connections. And once you've got your periodic tables of light and your periodic different tables of light, and hook it all up to your chemistry periodic tables, then we're up and running in the knowledge of good education for the future. Good education for farming, good education for all sorts of things. We will know about atmospheric changes. We will know about how the atmospheric changes will affect certain things, because we've got light technology with light periodic tables together, all hooked up to chemistry. And we will know the relevance of all of these tables and how they're all linked together, and how all of them interact and affect one another. So this is really where we are, right? We're in the process of new introduction of new information. So my name's Michael Ian Hammond, known as Eco, and I'm developer and designer of light technology, which is the crystal computer systems. I can't guarantee that you're going to get it in the form of which I would have created it, I'm going to be honest, but I think you will get at least some of it. If I manage to be able to build what I would create out of it, right, you would get to see something which is pure crystal and full of light and full of light and energy, and it is extremely colourful, or could be, can be, multiple changing. As it is, though, it's all being mixed in at present with the old technology style way of working. So for the phasing in processes. Now, a lot of this has got nothing to do with me, and a lot of it has got to do with manufacturers and companies and people that are already in their own styles of areas of research. But like I say, the one in which I would build and create is the full crystal system, because of what I know that it holds in properties. So I'd like to thank you for listening. And I do go on quite a lot, so I do apologise. But like I say, space and the space industry and the renewable energy project, and how the renewable energy project also coexists and works very well with light tables, for identification of function and performance, is also something which is also being investigated and being looked into. So anyway, thank you for listening.